complete with integrated kitchen and bathroom areas and has all of the tech you'd expect from the latest 2025 model. We'll also give you an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that any adventures you take in your new motorhome are taken in style. For a chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News, the People's Channel, where I will speak up for you, the forgotten majority. Coming up on tonight's show, as the country learns that the suspected synagogue attacker arrived in the UK from Syria as a child and was on bail for rape, there is a sinister pattern developing in Britain that is importing future terrorists and criminals. I'm going to be giving you my view tonight. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary has called for pro-Palestine marches, hate marches, to be cancelled as a mark of respect for yesterday's victims. But will the lefties listen? And the latest shocking case of grooming gang abuse hits Bradford, that city that did not want a national inquiry. Well, now we learn that a 15-year-old girl from the care system was able to marry her abuser in an Islamic ceremony, with her social worker even attending the wedding. Make it make sense. And in Mad in Conversation, I'm going to be speaking to top polling expert James Frayne with the latest figures translating into a strong performance for Reform UK in this week's local by-elections. We're going to be asking, should the party now begin to prepare for government, and what on earth is coming next? That's Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin, starts right now. Now, I'll also be joined tonight by my top panel, Acting Deputy Comment Editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, and journalist and broadcaster, Kai Wilshaw. As ever, let me know your views at gbnews.com/yoursay. Of course, you can find us on social media, including X at GB News. But right now, it's time for the news with Sophia Hill.
Matt, thank you. Very good evening. It's just gone 8 o'clock. These are your top stories. Terrorist Jihad al-Shami was on police bail for an alleged rape when he carried out the Manchester synagogue attack, according to sources. Meanwhile, crowds heckled the Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy today during a vigil that took place in Crumpston.
Palestine! Shame on you! Shame on you! Go to Palestine! Leave us alone!
The family of one of the victims, Adrian Dalby, have described him as a hero who tragically lost his life in an act of courage to save others. The attacker responsible for the killings was a 35-year-old British citizen of Syrian descent, and he was shot dead 7 minutes after police were called to the scene. He came to the UK as a young child and was granted British citizenship in 2006 as a minor. Yesterday's events didn't stop pro-Palestinian protests going ahead, however, and they did across the country last night. The Met Police are now calling for such rallies to be cancelled this weekend. Dame Sarah Mullally has been named as the next Archbishop of Canterbury, the first time a woman has been appointed to the role in the Church of England's history. In a speech this morning, she described the Manchester synagogue terror attack as horrific and warned that hatred and racism of any kind cannot be allowed to tear us apart. The announcement comes almost a year since Justin Welby resigned from the role as spiritual leader of the Church of England due to a damning review into its handling of a sexual abuse scandal. In her first words since confirmation of her appointment, she said that whilst the role is a huge responsibility, she feels a sense of peace and trust in God to carry her. Now, around 50,000 properties are without power in Northern Ireland as Storm Amy makes a hit. Amber weather warnings are in place for parts of Western Scotland and Northern Ireland, with heavy rain and strong winds of up to 100 miles an hour expected in exposed coastal areas this evening. Some schools in Northern Ireland closed early today, and ferry sailings from the west coast of Scotland were cancelled. The Forth Road Bridge has been closed to all traffic, and a number of other bridges have been shut for high-sided vehicles. And actress Dame Patricia Routledge has died at the age of 96.
My name is Bouquet. B-U-C-K-E-T. No, it's not bucket, it's bouquet.
She was best known for her role in the comedy TV show Keeping Up Appearances, but also for her Shakespearean work. The show, which captivated audiences in the 1990s, attracted as many as 13 million viewers at its peak. Her versatility, a word that she did not relish because it implied, as she said, not being very good at anything, took her career far beyond the range of sitcoms. Those are the latest headlines for now. More from me in an hour.
You can now watch GB News live across the United States of America and the world on Truth Plus. Scan the QR code to find out more, or visit gbnews.com/truth.
Good evening. Welcome back to Friday Night with me, Matt Goodwin. Well, yesterday morning's horrific attack on Jews attending a synagogue in Manchester has sent shockwaves across the country and across the world. And unsurprisingly, public anger in the UK is growing. Now, the alleged attacker, 35-year-old Jihad al-Shami, entered the UK from Syria as a young child before being granted British citizenship, aged just 16. Now, many would argue that he should never have been here in the first place, and he's not the only one. Just look at a string of Islamist terrorist atrocities in this country. The 2021 Liverpool terrorist, born in Iraq. The 2021 terrorist who assassinated Sir David Ames, his parents were from Somalia. The 2020 Reading terrorist, born in Libya. The 2020 Streatham terrorist, his parents came from Sri Lanka. The 2019 London Bridge terrorist, his parents came from Pakistan. The 2017 Manchester MEN terrorist, his parents came from Libya. The 2015 Leytonstone terrorist, born in Somalia. The 2013 Woolwich terrorist who assassinated Lee Rigby, his parents were Nigerian. The 2007 London-Glasgow terrorist bombers, their parents came from Iraq and India. And the 2005 supposedly homegrown 7/7 terrorists, well, 3 of them had parents from Pakistan, while the 4th was born in Jamaica. Notice the trend? We cannot afford to continue ignoring the blindingly obvious pattern. Why are these people in our country in the first place? So many of the evil terror attacks that we see being committed in our country are committed by first or second generation migrants. These attackers hate our country, they hate what we stand for, and they hate the Jewish community. Who could be next? That's the question I think we all want to ponder this evening. Now, the left would have you believe that anybody in this country can become British and anybody can become English the moment they step onto our shores and get hold of a few documents. But as the respected writer Garrett Jones argues in his book, The Culture Transplant, what we've actually been doing in this country and across the West is importing people from radically different cultures who retain the beliefs, the attitudes, the cultural practices, and yes, the propensity for violence from their home countries. Isn't this why we also had to deal with the rape gang scandal in this country? Because we had imported masses of people from rural Pakistan, where clan-based networks and the abuse of people who are non-Muslim is considered acceptable. Sadly, this is now being compounded by our insane open borders policy. Under Keir Starmer and the Labour government in the last week alone, we've imported another 2,000 illegal migrants from God knows where, who think who knows what. More than 800 arrived within 24 hours last Saturday, nearly 200,000 since 2018. We don't know who they are, we don't know where they're from, and we don't know what they believe. Why on earth is the government doing this to our own people? Almost every terrorist attack now is a reminder of this fact, that we are importing people who hate who we are, who cling to totally different cultures, identities and outlooks, all of which is making our own culture, identity and social cohesion harder to maintain. All of those inherited cultures, all of those traditions, all of those views and attitudes are passed down from one generation to the next. We can either keep ignoring this awkward reality or we can do something about it, which would mean radically reshaping our country and its future around people who have deep roots and ties to this country, who are genuinely integrating, who are calling time on mass uncontrolled immigration and who are doing whatever is required to fix our borders. And, most of all, who are launching an all-out assault on radical, violent Islamism. I've had enough of all of this, haven't you? Well, to discuss exactly what I've just laid out, I'm now welcoming journalist, author and historian Rafe Hadel-Manku to the show, a friend of the show, he's a friend of the channel. Rafe, what I've just said is going to be controversial, perhaps, in Westminster, London, Cambridge, Oxford, Brighton. But to many people out there in the country, it's a statement of the obvious, is it not?
Exactly, and I'm so pleased that you did that opening monologue, because I actually was going to say just the same thing, because actually linking the terror activities, you know, all the major terror activities, or most of them that we can name, and as you have named, including Sir David Amess and so forth, are linked to our asylum and our immigration system. And it's not surprising, of course, especially if you're an asylum seeker who's come here. The children, just because you're born here or you came here at a young age, doesn't mean that you're going to escape the trauma and the violence that your parents may have experienced in terms of your upbringing. Then we know that they're more prone to violence and to terrorist activities than you would find from the native homegrown population. And of course they bring their culture with them. I mean, look, for heaven's sake, there are English communities in Dubai that naturally carry on British traditions, and in Spain and in the south of France. It's not racist. It's very much part of the human condition to retain the character, the traditions, and the religion and others of your homeland. There is a fundamental issue here that we are too afraid to discuss. There are almost 45,000 people on the MI5 terror watch list. Over 90% of them are Muslim, huge number of whom are actually first generation or second generation British Muslims. That's 1 in 100 people. To put that into context, that's larger than the size of Hamas on October the 7th when they launched their attack on Israel. That's larger than the size of ISIS's forces in Iraq in 2014 when they launched their terrible attack there. It's half the size of the current full-time serving British Army. These are shocking statistics. And as the Islamic population grows, it's only going to get larger. Added to that, of course, 9% of Muslims in this country have admitted to being jihadis or supporting terrorism. That's around 350 to 400,000 people. It's forecast that in the next 25 years, the Muslim population of this country will double or treble. So yes, it is of course true that the majority of Muslims in this country are very well adjusted and integrated into our society, and that should be celebrated. But the reality is, it's not a fringe minority that express these extremist views, as many on the left and in the media and political class would have you believe. It's a very sizable majority.
Indeed, and I remember surveys just after the October 7th attacks finding that somewhere between 30 and 40% of British Muslims were actually expressing support for Hamas in some form or other. And I think there was a large share who openly expressed support for the attacks themselves, although we should underline that point that most British Muslims certainly reject the kind of violence and attacks that we've seen over the last couple of days. Rafe, can I just ask you a question? Because at the same time, liberal progressives in this country, civic nationalists, people who basically think you can become British, you can become English the moment you step foot on these islands and you get a piece of paper. I have always thought that is hopelessly unrealistic and adrift from what it actually takes to build a cohesive, high-trust nation where people are willing to support their strangers and they won't commit acts against that country. And the reason I just read out that list is because I think we have lots of people who can really only trace their roots back in this country maybe a few years, maybe one generation at most. Well, if you look at where we're going as a country, and I've put some of this data out on social media, by the 2070s, not long actually, it's only about 50 years, 40, 50 years, the foreign-born in this country, people born in other countries like Pakistan and India, Nigeria and so on, they and their first-generation, second-generation descendants will represent a majority in the entire country. So where we're heading to as a country is a population with much weaker ties, with thinner ties. I mean, I think that's a problem. What do you think?
Yes, the fundamental question is, at what point does Britain stop being British? If it's only 40% white British, is it still Britain? And what are the common connections? What are the common bonds that unite a nation? Normally it's sporting events, it's music, it's culture, it's things like the monarchy and our institutions, it's pride in our history and our heroes. But if you've imported vast numbers of people who are not only not British, but come from vastly different, I would say culturally incompatible nations, then what unites us? In fact, what's going to happen when we get to that state is that I personally think the white British will become a minority in this country by the 2050s. This is based upon what Professor David Coleman, an emeritus professor of immigration, said would happen in 2010. He said 2066, but we've had so much immigration since then. We're going to be reducing ourselves to ethno-nationalist silos. We're already seeing it with white flights, where, of course, one of the reasons property prices are increasing so much in the southwest is because of this exodus of white British people away from the cities. So this segregation is already happening. So this, this is the dark side of diversity. And as we know full well from all of the sociological studies, Muslims who live in segregated communities are more than twice as likely to become extremists. And these segregated communities often act like petri dishes for the cultivation of cultural practice that should be abhorrent to Western civilization. Acid attacks, honor killings, the rape gangs and so forth.
Well, that's Rafe Haydel-Manku joining us, and I do encourage you to engage with his work. I'm just going to bring in the panel at the moment, Acting Deputy Comment Editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, and broadcaster Kai Wilshaw. Poppy, if I can come to you, what Rafe is saying there essentially is we're ducking the difficult questions in this country. You look at actually who's committing these attacks. Yes, London says, well, British-born, but actually, fundamentally, there is a relationship between Islamist terror and the immigration choices that we've made in this country.
I completely agree. I mean, I think after these major terror attacks, the line that we usually get is don't look back in anger, thoughts and prayers, this is a terrible tragedy, but we won't let it divide us. When actually it's the outcome of a set of political decisions, So we have to politicise these events because they are the outcome decisions that have been made by politicians. And these often asylum decisions and decisions relating to immigration. There are unfortunately people who we have opened our arms to them through our refugee system. We've settled them, then we've given them housing, we've educated them, we've provided for their basic needs, we've given them healthcare, and they have repaid this kindness in the most horrific way possible. And I think something that I find particularly concerning is how many terror attacks in the future are going to have come from people who are currently entering the country now. Now, I know people are going to say, well, how could you possibly say that? How could you suggest that? But we know that there's a link between those two things. We know if you're coming from a war-torn country, even if you're second or third generation, you are more likely to be radicalised. So there will be more terror attacks, and there is a way to stop it.
Kai Wilshaw, we are setting ourselves up for disaster.
Look, I don't disagree that there's obviously a hatred of Jews in this country, and that goes for much of Western Europe. That has been one of the longest hatreds in history for centuries and centuries. What is absent from your analysis, and both of you, I agree with some of what both of you say, but what is absent is what are we going to do about this? Because actually, what you're saying, the logical conclusion of much of what you're saying, i.e. that it matters the culture from which you come, and implicit in some of that is the colour of your skin, and I think that's fair to say, and that also even first-generation immigrants and second-generation immigrants are not, don't shake that sort of cultural tie off. Where does that lead us? Does that mean that what you're saying is the only way to excise this from our society is to kick out all immigrants who have come here in the last few decades?
I think a perfectly sensible solution...
Is that based on skin colour or...
A perfectly sensible solution is to say there are certain communities, for example, those from Syria, who have radicalisation problems, many of whom lived quite unintegrated lives in the separate communities, who should not be allowed to settle in the UK. Now, here's the basic point. Let's not bring anyone else in. That's the starting point.
We're going to carry on this debate, but I just want to bring in author Harry Markham, because Harry's got a finger on the pulse here of how I think Jewish communities here in Britain are thinking and feeling after this attack. Harry, do you want to just share some thoughts with our viewers at home as to the mood out there?
Hi, Matt. Yeah, I think fundamentally we are really scared, and this was an extremely wounding incident, but frankly, it was perfectly and terribly predictable. In light of what I detail in The Melted Pot, what we have seen in Western Europe is this culture and this philosophy and this policy of multiculturalism, which of course rests upon the idea that all cultures, all ideas should be treated of equal value, except of course the culture which embraced all these cultures in the first place. And so you don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out that actually that might well backfire, because you'll end up tolerating things which don't really tolerate you and may well have a particular dislike for you and other minorities. And frankly, yesterday was a manifestation of that. And I finished this book on October 5th, 2023, 2 days before the 7th. I saw that a crisis was brewing and that a storm was about to rage.
And would you say that analysis of us living now in a culture that allows us to celebrate and promote some cultures and groups, but certainly not celebrate and promote others, do you think that also applies to the marches this weekend, the sense that actually some people are allowed to protest, some people are allowed to share their views on the streets while others are not? I'm just struck at the very different reaction we've seen from Labour politicians to what can only be described as the hate marches, compared to their very different reaction to what we saw with some of the marching on Britain's streets when it comes to other issues like registering disquiet over migration and broken borders.
Oh, of course. Well, but that's perfectly inevitable. The Labour Party have their own political considerations, particularly electorally on a local level, but they also have philosophical motivations. And, this is why so many people feel so politically and socially disillusioned. It's why so many former Labour voters are turning to Reform, because they feel that the party which ought to represent them treats them with utter contempt and doesn't take any of their concerns seriously. And, as someone who leans leftwards, I want to see parties which promote this all-important balance of defending a secular liberal democracy wrestle with these issues, but they're not. So actually the only possibility, the only means for change is with reform.
Well, thank you, Harry. Thank you. I don't mean to cut you off. We've just hit the first break here. That's Harry Markham sharing his views with us. Now, don't forget, at GB News, we want to hear what you think. Every day we're going to be running our poll of the day, and today we are asking you, our viewers, is the government doing enough to protect British Jews? You can scan the QR code on your screen right now to vote. And for all of our latest polls, news and how to vote, just go to gbnews.com/poll. But still to come, the Home Secretary has called for pro-Palestine marches to be cancelled as a mark of respect for yesterday's victims. But will the lefties listen? Indeed, will the Home Secretary take action? We will be discussing that in just 1 minute from now. This is Friday Night with Matt Goodwin, only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Are you panicking when you're in Northern Ireland, when you go out and about, because there is a lack of chargers?
Well, listen, I'm really pro-EV, and we've had the odd issue with broken EV chargers, particularly yesterday at both Ballymoney at Beasties and also over at Dunsilley. We had issues with chargers, but the charging infrastructure is used very rarely. My mother, for example, she has overnight charging at home. She's never used a public charger, and she's had the car for 3 years.
Yeah.
So if you've got that domestic overnight charging, it's cheap. It's very affordable if you buy a 2-year-old EV, and they are absolutely the way forward. I'm a Yorkshireman. I don't like parting with my brass. I want to get cheap motoring, and for less than a penny a mile and a car for less than 20 grand to start with, you know, it sounds a bit blasé saying £20,000, but relative to what these cars are new, they're incredible value for money. And we're seeing mass adoption. There's a garage in Richmond in North Yorkshire that sells more than half of the cars they sell are electric vehicles, and that's in a rural Dales area. So it's about having that domestic overnight charging and not having to rely on public infrastructure.
Danny, where it doesn't convince me at all is, right, so I'm living in London and I want to go to see Manchester United, and I might get there, but am I going to get back down again? Or worse still, if I'm not on full charge, I'm going to miss kickoff because I'm going to have to rely on a public charger somewhere. So is that the sort of anxiety? I mean, you were talking about range anxiety there, Ellie. Is that the sort of anxiety people have? I mean, I genuinely have that. Despite what we were hearing there from Fraser.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night with Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News, the People's Channel. Now, for nearly 2 years, pro-Palestine protests have swept across the country with displays of aggression, incitement to violence and even violence itself becoming part of the course. Police forces have faced accusations of two-tier policing, with many feeling, understandably, that pro-Palestine protesters have been given more leeway than most. And even last night, in the wake of the horrendous attack on Manchester's Jewish community, they couldn't have one day off. This was what commuters at London Liverpool Street Station had to face. Well, Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has now called for upcoming pro-Palestine marches to be cancelled, despite having previously attended them herself. Here's what she told GB News earlier today.
Those messages are utterly disgraceful. They are fundamentally un-British in nature, as far as I'm concerned. I would have wanted to see people in this country, step back from protesting for at least a few days, just to give the Jewish community here a chance to process what has happened.
Well, we now welcome to the show Chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, Gary Mond. Gary, protesters should step back, according to Shabana Mahmood, but there will be no ban. Essentially, the marches will be taking place, as far as we know.
The damage has already been done. There should have been no marches for the last 2 years. It's not just now. I fear that the situation is beyond redemption. We have a situation in schools where Jewish children are being abused and insulted because they're Jewish, a situation in hospitals where Jewish patients have to be treated by nurses wearing Free Palestine badges. We have a situation in higher education where Jews are frankly frightened to go about their lawful studies because of being frankly terrorised by Islamic extremists. We have a situation in education, in entertainment, where we're seeing Jewish actors being discriminated against, and also in sport.
Gary, when you saw David Lammy and other Labour politicians turning up at some of the memorial events and the gatherings, just tell us, how would that come across to British Jews?
I'm not a fan of Boris Johnson, but he used a great expression, vomit-inducing.
Right.
That is how it comes across.
I'm just going to show our viewers what happened when David Lammy turned up today at one of these events.
So therefore, I have great pleasure in introducing our Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy. And before I do, please, 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 we know how we all feel. We know how we all feel.
Go to Palestine! Shame on you! Shame on you! Go to Palestine!
Go to Palestine, you're not welcome here. Pretty loud, and that heckling did carry on throughout David Lammy's speech.
I'm not remotely surprised. We have a situation where both this Labour government and the previous Conservative government have lacked the will to do anything about anti-Semitism. We see the actual outcomes I expressed earlier, but what should have happened is firstly, that the marches should never have been allowed, as they weren't allowed in France and Germany. And secondly, we should have gone a step further, which I know is controversial what I'm about to say now. We should have banned the Palestinian flag. It's a flag of a fictitious country, which Keir Starmer has tried to make less fictitious for his own political ends. But it is nevertheless a fictitious country, and it is essentially a hate flag. Just as the Hamas flag and the Hezbollah flag are banned, so should the Palestinian flag be banned as well.
What do you think about those people who say that actually there has been a link between Labour's decision to recognise Palestine and the kind of attacks that we saw this week?
I think there's definitely been a link. What I would actually say, what puzzles me, to be honest, is its virtue signalling. Does Keir Starmer really think it's going to help him win more Muslim votes? You see, I know some of your earlier commentators are talking about what Muslims are thinking. I think that they're generally in two categories. There are those law-abiding Muslims who, like the rest of us, are going to vote at the next election on the basis of national issues. And then there are the Islamists who are going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn anyway, or for the Gaza independence. Starmer's not going to get any votes at all from that combination.
I just want to bring in the panel, if I can, acting deputy comment editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, and political commentator Kai Wilshaw. Kai, what on earth were Labour thinking turning up at these events? I mean, you saw the visceral reaction there. Surely Number 10 would have known this was not a good move.
I don't see the alternative. I think it's the right thing to do to show support to the Jewish community. And had they not done so, you would be sitting here on the panel saying how egregious it is that the government is showing no support to the Jewish community. I don't see how they can win in this situation, frankly. I think they're trying to do the best they can to show national leadership, but they have failed to do so in the past, I agree. But they're trying to properly show support to the Jewish community, and especially ahead of these horrible hate marches.
I think showing proper support to the Jewish community, though, isn't enough just standing up there on a lectern and saying thoughts and prayers. It's action. And I think, you know, what you've described, the 2-year breakdown in relationship between the government and the Jewish community, it's because there hasn't been action. It has just been platitudes.
That's absolutely right.
And we have got to a situation in this country now, we have guards standing outside of synagogues. Several guards.
And Jewish schools and other Jewish places.
People not being able to walk down the street, showing that they are members of a religious minority. People in their sports cars blasting out anti-Jewish slurs. It is disgusting, and it has been equivocated against on the basis of electoral vote grabbing.
I don't agree with that.
That is true. You know that is true. The Labour Party is terrified that in some of its wards it will lose votes if it doesn't come out and full-throatedly support Gaza.
So would you ban the marches, as Gary suggested? Would you have banned these marches for the last 2 years?
I think when it became clear that many of those people on the marches, even though the majority of many of the people in the marches who were wearing prescribed flags, shouting out pro-Hezbollah chants,
majority of people
I would be like, first of all, I think, why are they in the UK in the first place? place? Why are these people in the UK in the first place?
There's been hundreds of thousands of people on these marches, and you're saying that the majority of them think that.
Can I just quickly get back to
that's
this
outrageous.
point, Kai, about action? What do you want to see, Gary? What do British Jews want to see from this government going forward?
The couple of points I made earlier about banning the marches and banning the flag, but also there is a question of whether the legislation in place is adequate to deal with anti-Semitic hatred.
Yeah.
I don't believe it is. And I would like to see a Reform UK government in the future, which is, frankly, they're the only political party who are going to take this issue seriously. I think, as one of your earlier commentators said, and I would like to see them come up with legislation that are going to try and address the matter. But can I also just say about the fact that people going on these marches because they support Palestine? If they support Palestinian people, what they need to do is get behind Donald Trump's initiative in solving the issues in Gaza. That is what needs to be done. And it's very interesting to see how Hamas and many of the Islamic militants are opposed to what Trump is trying to do.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Gary, for joining us, and thank you to my panel for their comments. We will carry on debating these issues, because coming up next, I'm very rarely lost for words, but tonight I am. The latest shocking case of grooming gang abuse has just emerged in Bradford. You're not going to believe this case. It's absolutely just sickening. A 15-year-old girl from the care system was able to marry her abuser in an Islamic ceremony, with the social worker even attending the wedding. Absolutely insane. I'll see you in 2 minutes to tell you all about it and talk to people who know a lot about it. This is Friday Night with Matt Goodwin.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Looking ahead to tomorrow across southern parts of Europe, and there is a lot of fine weather around, but not everywhere. The same band of rain that's been sweeping through today across the UK in association with Storm Amy is going to fringe into northwestern parts of Spain and Portugal, bringing some wet weather here. Elsewhere, generally dry for most, but some heavy, showery bursts of rain likely across more eastern parts, particularly affecting Greece at times. Otherwise, it's looking largely fine into next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Amy is crossing the UK as we speak, passing northern Scotland and bringing its strongest and most damaging wind gusts to much of Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland through the night time and into much of Saturday. You can see how tightly packed the isobars are as Storm Amy makes its way across the north of Scotland. Spells of rain pushing through the whole of the UK. For many parts, 50 to 60 miles an hour wind gusts are expected overnight, along with a spell of heavy rain. But it's across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North and West Wales, where gusts could exceed 70 miles an hour in exposed spots. And especially for the west and north of Scotland overnight, we're looking at wind gusts of 100 miles an hour for the Western Isles and 85 miles an hour for the northeast of Scotland during Saturday as Amy pulls away. That accompanied by heavy rainfall continuing to stream into much of Scotland, with large accumulations expected across the Northwest Highlands in particular. Northern Ireland seeing a wet and windy start, Northern England as well. And for much of the south, we're going to see showers interspersed by brighter spells, but very blustery out there, 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. So it's a windy day on Saturday for the whole of the UK, but by this stage, the strongest winds and the biggest impacts are expected across the Northern Isles into parts of Caithness, parts of Aberdeenshire as well. That's where wind gusts could reach 70 to 85 miles an hour. The strong wind from the northwest will feel cold out there, temperatures dipping compared to the last few days, and there'll be frequent showers feeding in. Similar on Sunday, but we're starting to see it calm down at this stage. Amy pulls away, still a strong breeze from the northwest, still feeling on the cold side, still some showery rain around, but nowhere near as unsettled as the next 24 hours. And then into next week, we've got a westerly breeze, but it's not looking quite as stormy.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Friday Night with Matt Goodwin, right here on GB News, the People's Channel. Now, after the grooming gang scandal exploded earlier this year, more and more sickening cases are now falling under the national spotlight. And one of the latest is that of Raja Zulkarnain, who married a 15-year-old girl, 15-year-old child, in an Islamic wedding ceremony, and is now one of 8 men of Pakistani heritage to have been found guilty of sexual offences against this child. The victim was groomed and sexually abused by men from the age of 13, and that continued when she was moved in a Bradford children's home. Perhaps most shockingly, their Islamic wedding was attended by the victim's social worker, despite care home staff fearing that she was being exploited. Now, her abuser has been jailed for a minimum of 23 years after his trial was told that he sometimes locked the victim in a cellar at a property in Bradford, abused her and deprived her of food, education and medical care. Could this be why Bradford has been so resistant to a full national inquiry into the rape gangs? Well, to discuss this, we're joined on the show by a grooming gang survivor, Ellie Reynolds. Ellie, thank you for your time this evening. We appreciate you joining. I am struck by what I am reading in the newspapers alongside the refusal of local officials, politicians, councillors in places like Bradford to hold a national inquiry. These people resisted it until the last possible moment. And I suspect it's because of cases like this, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think they are very scared if the inquiry was upheld and things started moving forward. I really think that it will open a massive can of worms for how complicit these authorities and services really are.
So you think if we actually really properly start digging, start looking behind closed doors, start really asking officials what they knew and when, you think we're likely to find a systemic scandal involving social workers, police officers, councillors, and you think that is the big reason why they have given such resistance to a national inquiry?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all to do with fear on if everything got out, we would really start to see how weak and lawless the country is where grooming gangs and scandals are concerned. Especially like these cases that have gone on in Bradford. I mean, you can't even fathom in your head how this girl that was a child was married off to an abuser, and the care system that were meant to be protecting her witnessed that marriage. Where was their duty of care for that girl? And you know, it's sickening, because ultimately then that girl's been broken twice. She's been broken by her abuse and she's been broken by the systems and injustice, and it stinks.
And everybody involved, every official involved in this cover-up should be sacked and held accountable. Can I just lastly ask you, Ellie, do you think this is a deliberate cover-up, or do you think this is a cover-up through incompetence?
I'd say both, actually. Yeah. I think it all boils down to them being so fearful that people are really going to start seeing the harsh reality of just how complicit the people that we're meant to trust are in this.
Yeah, indeed. Well, thank you for your time. I'm just going to bring in the panel. That's Ellie Reynolds there. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm just going to get the thoughts of Acting Deputy Comment Editor at The Telegraph, Poppy Coburn, and journalist and broadcaster Kai Wilshaw. Kai, if I can start with you this time. This is absolutely horrific from Bradford. Amid a endless number of already horrific revelations regarding the rape gangs. Why on earth did the Labour movement and so many people on the left resist lifting the lid on places like Bradford?
Can I give you my honest belief? Is I think for a long time, and you see it again and again with this government, they're trying to do things process, do things in the right way, and they don't really tap in properly to the mood of the country. And what was clear very early on to people who appear on this channel regularly, to anybody with half a brain, frankly, was that the grooming gang scandal was going to explode in this way, and by not dealing with it, it was going to drip feed through into the public consciousness. But I don't think that there was malice behind it in the vast majority of cases, especially up top. But at a local level, who can say? Because clearly this is endemic in some parts of the country.
Poppy Coburn.
I have to disagree with the malice aspect. And the reason for that is, GBNews has done some really good investigative work on grooming gangs. When the story kind of was out of the media for a long time, they kept going at it. And one of the things I remember a couple of years ago when the Home Office report came out on why the grooming gangs were the ethnicity component of it, this was deliberately downplayed by people in the Labour Party, deliberately, and their favourable researchers. They said that Suella Braverman, who was reported to Ipso, a complaint she made about just accurately reporting the facts about the grooming gangs. Now, Baroness Casey in her latest report has come out and said that that was the wrong thing to do. It's completely wrong on behalf of the Labour Party. Now, have they apologised for this? Has Jess Phillips apologised? Has Lucy Powell apologised? No, they haven't. They're still resistant to having a national grooming gang inquiry. And look, OK, are they the ultimate villains in this case? No. But they're the people that have political power. And as a country, how can we heal? How can we move on unless we know the full scale of what happened?
Well, and I can say this channel will not stop pursuing the truth and justice that those girls and their families deserve. Of course, you followed some of the reporting that this channel has led the way on. Now, coming up next, in Matt in Conversation, I'm going to be speaking to a top polling expert, a man who really knows the numbers, James Frayne, with the latest figures, translating into a very strong performance for Reform UK in this week's by-elections, local by-elections, I should add, but they certainly point to something seismic that may be unfolding because of many of the issues that we've been discussing right here on Friday Night with Matt Goodwin. I will see you in 2 minutes.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it?
no,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power. Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night with Matt Goodwin right here on GB News. Now it's time for the part of the show called Matt in Conversation, where I talk to somebody that I think is very interesting, somebody that's got their finger on the pulse. And tonight we're going to be talking to somebody who can talk to us about these seismic political shifts that are upending our traditional two-party democracy. Reform UK won 6 council by-elections last night, with the party's Doge chief, Zia Youssef, hailing the results as staggering. Now, one of the seats won last night was the Hutton South Ward on Brentwood Council. The Reform candidate, Russell Quirk, gained with a whopping 30.2% swing from the Conservatives, of course, getting ready for their conference in the next couple of days. The Conservatives, that is, not Reform. Now, the seat was formerly one of the safest Conservative council seats in Britain. Labour just about clung on in Chester and Cheshire West as they fended off a strong challenge from Reform to retain a council seat, which had threatened to tip the balance of power against it. And this comes as recent national polling has revealed that if a general election was called tomorrow, 35% of British people, that's more than 1 in 3, would vote Reform. Meanwhile, Labour is trailing well behind, according to this Find Out Now poll, on 19%, the Conservatives on an even lower 14%. Well, joining me now is polling expert and political strategist James Frayne. James, we are obviously witnessing a realignment of the British political system, but just how far is this going to go in your mind? Where on earth are we leading? It's uncharted territory. Where are these trends taking us?
It is uncharted territory, and the truth is that people like me can come on and pontificate about this is what's going to happen, that's what's going to happen. The truth is we don't really know because this is all so new. So Reform are now hitting mid-30s. I think probably they have a ceiling closer to 40. Before Nigel Farage formally joined the party, just before the last election, Reform had a ceiling somewhere in the mid-20s. Nigel Farage came in, supercharged the party, took the party over time into 30. I think it could get to 40 at some point. That will only happen, I think, if the public are persuaded that there's ongoing failure, particularly on things like small boats and on more conventional immigration as well. But if they think there's failure to deal with cost of living increases, NHS isn't getting any easier to use, etc., more and more people will start piling into that Reform camp. So it is possible that they get towards the high 30s. And as you said, at that point, you are in revolutionary territory.
I mean, James, I was going to say, you've sort of taken the words out of my mouth, but if you look at the fundamentals that are driving the Reform vote, you know, I've done some surveys of Reform voters over the last couple of years. You think about broken borders. Well, the illegal migration crisis doesn't look set to improve anytime soon. If anything, it's getting worse. The boats are getting bigger. We've now got super boats, large boats, not small boats. The Labour budget is going to be an absolute nightmare for Keir Starmer. Taxes are going to go up. Food prices are going up 6% this winter. Energy prices are going up by £100. Doesn't look like the economy is going to turn around. And then we've got this legal migration issue. Masses and masses of legal immigration into the country, which Labour don't really want to talk about, as we've seen in this debate over the indefinite leave to remain policy. So let me just put it to you, you know, what is going to change here? Which of these fundamentals that are driving the Reform vote are going to change in the next couple of years? Because I don't see anything that is going to completely go in a different direction.
No, I agree. And it's very difficult to see how Labour can turn things around anytime soon. I think the things that I don't think politicians have quite understood that what most Reform voters want is not really revolution. What they want is for the government to fulfil or to deliver the basic functions of the state. It's not terribly revolutionary. They want an NHS to work. They want border control. They want streets to be safe. You know, they don't want the whole system to be upended. They're not looking for, you know, the equivalent of the monarchy to be removed or something like that. They simply want what they think is very, very straightforward delivery of government policy. When that isn't delivered, then they are open to looking at all sorts of alternatives that promise those sorts of things. So I think Reform is often talked about as a revolutionary party, and they are at one level, but on another level, as I say, they're really just about delivering what ought to be sort of meat and drink to every political party.
But isn't the point, James, that the ruling class have moved so far to the cultural left on lots of these issues that they do consider those things to be revolutionary? You know, actually controlling the borders, having manageable lower levels of migration, saying a boy cannot become a girl and a girl cannot become a boy. You know, these statements of the obvious. Out there in the country, everyone rolls their eyes and says, yeah, we've known this for years. But in this kind of elite class that has been radicalising over the last 20 years, has gone sort of so far off the cliff that it's no longer in touch with voters, they do see this stuff as being sort of revolutionary.
I think we have all of us, me included, become very blasé about some of the things that happen in this country that are not normal. So when you look at the appalling terrorist attack that we saw this week, how many people were surprised? Not really. You know, people sort of were expecting this to happen, and sometimes you have to give yourself a bit of a slap in the face that, you know, these things are not normal. You know, we shouldn't have to live with, you know, live with these great sense of fear and terror. And I think we all need to sort of shake ourselves out of this complacency that we have and really get back to understanding that, as I said, delivery of the basic functions of the state is not a terribly revolutionary thing to want. It's very, very simple. I think, just by the way, now we're talking about this, obviously Keir Starmer's big push this week was that Reform was an extreme party. And time will tell how the public judge that. You know, we'll see how things shake out over the next week.
Okay, James, I'm going to have to stop you there, I'm afraid. We've run out of time. Patrick Christis is following us. Patrick, what have you got coming up tonight? Well, thank you so much to the audience. Yes, absolutely. Well, there's a lot to go at this evening, isn't there? David Lammy was booed and jeered at by those crowds. This is what happens when Labour comes into contact with reality, I think, isn't it? Then why on earth can we not stop a protest due to take place tomorrow in support of a banned terror group? I mean, the Prime Minister says he wants to stop it, the Home Secretary says they want to stop it, the Chief of Police wants to stop it. If only we had people with power to stop it, eh? But no, apparently that's going ahead anyway, so we'll talk about that. And I do have quite an important update for you on some information about that vile, depraved attacker in Manchester yesterday. So we've got all of that and much more coming your way for the next 2 hours. Stay tuned. See you then.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Storm Amy is crossing the UK as we speak, passing northern Scotland and bringing its strongest and most damaging wind gusts to much of Northern Ireland, northern and western Scotland through the night time and into much of Saturday. You can see how tightly packed the ISA bars are as Storm Amy makes its way across the north of Scotland. Spells of rain pushing through the whole of the UK. For many parts, 50 to 60 miles an hour wind gusts are expected overnight, along with a spell of heavy rain. But it's across Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, North and West Wales, where gusts could exceed 70 miles an hour in exposed spots. And especially for the west and north of Scotland overnight, we're looking at wind gusts of 100 miles an hour for the Western Isles and 85 miles an hour for the northeast of Scotland during Saturday as Amy pulls away. That accompanied by heavy rainfall continuing to stream into much of Scotland, with large accumulations expected across the Northwest Highlands in particular. Northern Ireland seeing a wet and windy start, Northern England as well. And for much of the south, we're going to see showers interspersed by brighter spells, but very blustery out there, 50 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts. So it's a windy day on Saturday for the whole of the UK, but by this stage, the strongest winds and the biggest impacts are expected across the Northern Isles into parts of Caithness, parts of Aberdeenshire as well. That's where wind gusts could reach 70 to 85 miles an hour. The strong wind from the northwest will feel cold out there, temperatures dipping compared with the last few days, and there'll be frequent showers feeding in. Similar on Sunday, but we're starting to see it calm down at this stage. Amy pulls away, still a strong breeze from the northwest, still feeling on the cold side, still some showery rain around, but nowhere near as unsettled as the next 24 hours. And then into next week, we've got a westerly breeze, but it's not looking quite as stormy.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boiler sponsors the weather on GB News.
You could bank an incredible £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. And if that wasn't enough, you'll also get to drive away in this brand new motorhome. This brand new 2025 Benamar Primero could be yours. It comes with all the mod cons you'd expect from a vehicle worth over £74,000 and comfortably sleeps 4 people. This prize package is worth over £104,000. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Miriam, you can't be serious. Scrapping the triple lock on state pensions? Madness.
Andrew, we just can't carry on pretending. The numbers just don't add up. We've got to be honest with people. We've got to face the facts. That's what people want.
Well, that's what you get on GB News and on Britain's Newsroom. Lively debates, lively conversation.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first, and we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pearce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/your say. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/your say. Because